So the first thing that I want to point out is that we've gone through a transition. Um, Now we're starting new material, and the heart of this new material is to look at what we call the theory of the firm or the profit maximization problem of producers. So the reason we're looking at this in more detail is that we're trying to describe why suppliers make the supply decisions that they make. So this is all related to supply and demand and what we've been doing before, but we're really looking behind the supply curve. And I want to point out something that um, is kind of maybe a little bit hidden, um, but it's an assumption that we make based on the law of supply. Um, and so the law of supply in words. So here we've got quantity, and then we're measuring price on the vertical axis, and we normally measure it in dollars, currency units, right? Um, and all the law of supply says is that the supply curve is going to be upward sloping generally, right? And in fact, if you really pay close attention, the only thing that the law of supply really says is that the supply curve can't slope downward, right? So as and the way we normally say this is as the price increases, right? So the price is going up and up, the quantity associated with that price is going to be bigger than it was before. The quantity that producers want to supply is going to go up. But we didn't really explain why that's the case. So let's see. Uh, Camden, are you here this morning? Camden, do you have a mic? Maybe we just do in chat. How about Mary? Mary, do you have your mic this morning?
Yes, sir.
Okay. How are you doing?
Um, I'm all right, but I'm a little tired.
Tired? You it's 10:17 a.m. Anyway, I'm just giving you a hard
I
time.
slept really late last night.
Yeah. So I have um a 23-year-old, a 21-year-old, and an 18-year-old. And my 18-year-old is still living with me. She graduated from high school um, in spring. Yay, class of 2020.
That's me.
Yeah, what a mess. Did you guys do drive-through graduation or did you do Zoom graduation or YouTube graduation?
We did drive through, but we thought we could do in person, so we pushed it all the way back to August.
Yeah, they canceled it, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, same thing with my daughter. But they actually so they canceled any hope of doing something in person. I don't know, in July or something. But they had a YouTube graduation. Ugh. And did you guys miss prom too?
Well, yeah, everything. We actually um, canceled school the day right before a musical was supposed to be performed.
Yeah, I
Yes, everything's
totally,
canceled.
I totally get. Yeah, my daughter went through the exact same thing, but she also went through the same thing as you today, which she's normally like up on Instagram or whatever at like 1 o'clock in the morning, and then I just saw her this morning, and she was like, "Where's my coffee?" So anyway, yeah, I can relate. So But what I wanted to get to is that, does this make sense to you? I mean, I don't know if so, like, let's put some numbers in here. At $5, and then we'll raise the price. So we do law of supply stuff, right? So then at $10. And do you drink Starbucks on a regular basis?
Um,
No?
oh, before quarantine, probably a lot.
Oh, really? So my daughter still goes to Starbucks, but she just does the drive-through,
Hmm.
and then she'll sit in her car with her friends. So so um let's imagine, right? So in this scenario, um $5 for a Starbucks drink, right?
Hmm.
And then we'll say Starbucks is then their quantity supply, the amount that they would want to sell. I'm just drawing the arrows to be clear what we're talking about. Does this make sense to you? Um, and let's say they would sell 100. Do you have a favorite Starbucks drink?
Uh,
No.
can't really think
So
on
you
the top
really
of my
stopped
head.
going to Starbucks altogether.
Yeah, I really did.
No boba, no nothing. Just like you're just at home, shelter in
Kind
place.
of, yeah.
Oh my gosh. So this must be the highlight of your day. Yeah, yeah. Hey, right? Econ's fun. Anyway, so yeah, because my daughter still does like quite a bit of stuff. She had a job this summer too, which was a lot of fun for her, just because she got to get out of the house. Had a good reason to do it. But you see, so my daughter, a lot of times she'll get a chai latte at Starbucks, and she pays about $5. So let's just say the quantity supplied is 100 for chai lattes, okay,
Mhm,
out of $5, right? So does it make sense to you that if Starbucks was able, right? Because this is just, you remember, supply is like a wish list, and so is demand. None of these prices are necessarily real. It's just saying how the supplier would respond if it was the case that they were able to charge a particular price for their product, right?
mhm,
So does it make sense? So if Starbucks is able to charge $5, they want to supply 100 chai lattes, but if they're able to charge $10, then they um, have a quantity to supply it, or they'd like to supply, let's say, 250 chai lattes. Does that make sense? I assume you understand what I said, but does that sound like a reasonable way for Starbucks to respond?
I'm trying to recall what you said in the video lecture about the example where you talked about the farmers.
Okay.
Is that
Well, you know, don't don't try to there's not well, I mean, there's a right answer, but there's not really a right answer here. It's just really about, remember, I mean, I tried to say this before, and it probably was lost on you because, I know what it's like. It's like trying to drink water from a fire hose. There's all this information, and but economics really is supposed to be common sense. It's just written down common sense. So if it doesn't, it's supposed to describe human behavior. So if it doesn't describe your behavior, if you can't relate, if the only way that you can think about it is in terms of like rules, then there's something a little bit missing. And I'm not saying it's your fault. I'm just saying that economics is supposed to make sense. So for just from your perspective personally, if you were a supplier, right? If you got $5 for um, and that's actually one of the things my daughter almost did. So, um, it, do you know what acai bowls are?
yeah.
Have you ever had one? No?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So my daughter worked at a place that made acai bowls this summer. And she was, well, okay, obviously I'm her dad, right? But she was really good at it. And you might think, was it making an acai bowl really that hard? No, okay. So she worked at this place where she made acai bowls and they were like kind of fancy. And then for advertisements, they would put them up on Instagram. And so the bowls that she made were always like they looked so nice that they would always use her as like the person to make the bowls for Instagram. So I told her at the end, I was like, well, now that you know how to do this, and because you were in charge of like all of the promotion, maybe you should just open your own like, acai bowl shop. Um, she didn't take me up on it, but she thought about it. Um, but so I'm saying like you or my daughter or anybody else should say like, okay, like pretend you're making some product and you can charge $5 for the product, and at $5 you want to supply 100 of them. Would it make sense to you if you were able to charge $10 that you'd want to supply more?
Yes.
Yeah. Again, can you talk a little bit about that? Like, why does that make sense to you? Why do you think, yeah, of course. Like, yeah, if I could get more money, I'd want to supply more.
From the producer perspective,
Yeah,
we
well, and from
always
you
want to,
personally, yeah, go ahead.
yeah. I think from the producer perspective, you always want to maximize your profit. So if you know you, uh, I don't know, I guess if you can sell at a higher price, um, um, you will obviously do that.
Yes,
And
so you're always gonna try to get the best price you can,
yeah.
right? Um, but do you see how it, I don't know if you got this, but it got a little bit difficult to kind of explain because there's this issue of like, well, yeah, of course, um, I want to maximize profits. And I had promised one time a little while ago I would talk a little bit more about profit. But profit um, is equal to revenue minus cost, right?
Hmm.
And so what's kind of unclear is that yeah, sure, it seems like if I'm charging $5, maybe I'd want to supply a smaller quantity, and if I charge 10, I'd want to supply a bigger quantity. But it's not really clear how the prices and the quantities are related to profit, right? I mean, revenue is just one part of the equation, right? Revenue is the amount of money you bring in for selling the product. To be more clear, the way that we calculate revenue is price times quantity. Okay. And I don't know if this will be helpful for you, but um, and I'll do it this way. Mm, okay. So check this out, right? You see that rectangle there in green?
Yes.
Okay. Notice that the area of this rectangle is the price, which is the height of the triangle. And I don't know if you can see that, but here's the height of the triangle. It goes from 0 to 5. So this side of the rectangle is 5. And it, obviously these things aren't drawn to scale, and that's okay. Um, but the other side of the triangle goes from 0 to 100, which is the quantity supplied. So if we take 100 times 5, then what we're going to get, and I'll draw a little arrow there. So revenue at that point, and I'll just put rev for revenue, is 5 times 100, which is equal to $500, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's also the area of the green rectangle. In fact, there are a lot of textbooks and there are a lot of economists who just call this the revenue rectangle. Okay, and then notice if I'll do a different color here. If we measure the revenue rectangle at a different point on the supply curve, so like at 10 and 250, right? Then we can calculate again. 250 times 10 is going to be $2,500, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, so measuring these um, revenue rectangles tells us that, sure enough, if we follow along the supply curve, the revenue is going to change, right? The revenue is going to increase as if we sell more units as our price increases. We don't know anything about the costs, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it could be the case that at $5 selling 100 units, and this is one of the things that I that you would think about if you're a business person, right? Like I said, it's common sense. If you really were gonna sit down and what's your major, Mary?
Uh, Mechanical engineering.
Okay, that's a great major. I don't know if I told you, but my sister has a PhD in mechanical engineering slash material science, um, and she really likes it. Um, so, but um, maybe someday, if you become a mechanical engineer, or when you become a mechanical engineer, maybe you'll end up opening your own firm to supply those types of services. And then you'll be interested. I mean, maybe you'll design and build something, or maybe you'll just be designing things. And so your output would be the number of projects you design per year or something like that. But I don't know if this makes sense, but it might be that your production technique has to change when you expand your operation, right? If instead of supplying 100 units, right, you go to 250, maybe you have to get a much bigger factory, right?
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
And that might affect your costs dramatically. It might be so expensive. And this is one of the things I talked to my daughter about. One of the first questions most businesses face is trying to figure out their capacity. What size of business, right? If you're going to make an acai bowl place, do you need just a little tiny store in some strip mall someplace, or do you need a bigger store? It kind of depends, right, on how many of these things you think you're going to be making. In the place where my daughter was working, they only had 3 people um, making acai bowls, so they kind of had a small volume. But if they were going to try to increase their production a lot, and this was actually a problem that her business, the business she was working for, faced, is that they were taking all of their orders online um, because of COVID. They were trying to minimize the contact, and so they would get an order online, and then when it was ready, they would send an email or notification to the person who ordered the item that was ready for pickup. So they would just have people come into the store one at a time, and pick up their order and leave. And because their acai bowls were so popular, they had people that were ordering and had to wait like over an hour to pick up their acai bowl. So they were thinking about expanding capacity, but it's more expensive to rent a bigger space. So the main point I wanted to point out is that profit is revenue minus cost, and The supply decisions of the firm based on the law of supply really only speak to this issue of revenue directly. So we've got to do something more to really actually kind of figure out, okay, what's going on with the costs? Is it really the case that the firm is going to increase their profits by increasing the quantity that they supply? And and all of this discussion was just to make the single point that it's not obvious that the best thing for the firm to do to maximize their profits is to increase the quantity. Even though that's what the law of supply says, we need to explain that in more detail by talking about the firm's costs. So now that we're talking about profit and costs are a component of profit, we want to talk about the firm's costs in more detail. And in particular, this is something that's going to be a little bit harder. But since I got you, Mary, I'm gonna ask you if this makes sense to you. That if you're gonna maximize your profits, it has to be the case that you minimize your costs.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, you know, the way that we normally explain this in economics is we say, well, okay, just imagine some case where um, remember profits are revenue minus costs, that you have a certain amount of revenue because you're producing a certain amount of the good and you're charging a certain price, and you don't have the lowest costs possible. Well, then obviously, since costs take away from profit, right? There's a minus sign right there. Anytime you shrink your costs, you minimize them, make them lower, your profit automatically goes up. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So, so I would kind of like just add this. Um, let's see. I'll put profit there, and I'll put um, cost there, and I'll just do a couple little arrows here. So you increase profit whenever you decrease your costs. Okay. Now, the one other thing that I want to point out is that um, you know, this arrow only goes in one direction. So it is possible that you could be minimizing your costs, but not maximizing your profit. Um, because just think about if you make something and you make it in the least costly way, but then you just throw it away, so you collect no revenue, right?
Mhm.
So profit maximization implies cost minimization, but cost minimization does not imply profit maximization. So it's just something to keep in mind. So what we're going to do next is we're going to go ahead and talk about the cost of the firm and talk about cost minimization. And so what I want to do is stop sharing, and now I'm going to share my screen again, and let's see if, oh, I think it's this one. Okay, so you guys can see the announcements now. And okay, so can you, Mary, can you see the textbook?
Yes.
Yeah, so this is your textbook, and this is, just so you know, on the table of contents, we're in this section down here on production. And what I opened up was production costs. And I did that too because this is going to be the material that, so I haven't released it yet, but I will soon. This next practice exercise 13 is on costs. And in order to answer these questions, the material that I showed you in this production costs section are going to be very helpful. And then if I go down to 14, so now we see these cost curves for 14, and then for cost curves 2, that's 15. We see more cost curves. Okay. So, and I want to point one other thing out, and that is some of these graphs are a little bit imperfect, right? This blue circle, right? It points where ATC is equal to MC, which you guys don't know much about yet, but that point is going to be the minimum point of the ATC function. So it may not look like it's a minimum just because it doesn't cross exactly in the right place, but it is mathematically. So it's pretty good, but just remember that this is supposed to be on the green line. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about the cost of production. So when we look at costs, we're going to be talking about the total cost of production. Now, I should point out that, and I'll assign you guys some lectures on this to watch for next week. But when we talk about costs in economics, we always talk about what we call the opportunity costs. And I think I mentioned this once before, but I'll mention it again here because now we're talking more explicitly about costs. Um, so opportunity costs include what you might normally think of as costs, which are like labor and materials, costs of electricity, insurance, those types of things. But all of those things that you're thinking typically are costs are what in economics we call explicit costs. And they're explicit in the sense that they're right in your face and you can't ignore them. And that's because you have a receipt when you make the transaction. So explicit costs are also sometimes called accounting costs. But economists in opportunity cost also recognize that sometimes there are implicit costs. Implicit costs don't generate a cash flow, they don't generate a receipt, but they're a true cost, and they have to do with the way that a business is managed or the behavior of someone. So, for example, and this kind of gets back to that issue before, as I said, well, you minimize your costs, but you throw things away, right? So there are ways that businesses can be managed where resources are wasted. And the most typical examples, there are two of them that are given in almost every economic textbook. One of them is the implicit cost of idle equipment. So what we mean by idle equipment is equipment you're not using. And so the best example I can give you, and you probably don't realize this, but I'll talk to somebody in a minute and see if you guys know what I'm talking about. But to think about a big construction firm that uses backhoes and bulldozers and big pieces of equipment like that, drilling equipment, who knows? Um, Big stuff that I don't know if you guys remember doing this, but my kids always played with those things as little toys, when they were in the sandbox. Dump trucks, bulldozers, backhoes. So, um, so imagine a construction firm that has purchased a new dump truck, and they purchased it with cash. They've got no payments every month, They don't have it. They're not leasing it. They're not paying payments. It's paid for. And their construction business is kind of down. They don't have jobs and they're just leaving it parked, right? Well, from an accounting perspective, that dump truck's not generating any cash flow. It's not generating any costs. So most accountants would ignore that the dump truck was just sitting there. But it also turns out that there's an active market in rental equipment. And so what most companies do when they have a piece of equipment like a backhoe or a bulldozer or a dump truck they're not using is they'll take it to an equipment rental lot, or these days it probably happens more online, and they'll make it available for some other company to rent, maybe for the day or the week, so that it can generate revenue for them. And so if you've got a parked piece of idle equipment and it's not available to be rented because the construction manager was asleep and just didn't put it up on the website for equipment rental or make it available, then the company's actually losing money. They're giving up the potential to rent that equipment. And so that's a cost that the company bears, even though they don't necessarily have a receipt for the revenue that they've given up, right? So that's an implicit cost of idle equipment. The other one that's typically mentioned is the opportunity cost or the implicit cost of the owner's time. So the way that most small businesses work is that the profit that the company generates is used as income for the owner. And so, in fact, so I'll tell you. So I see you, Ezekiel. You want to chat with me for a minute?
Yes.
Yeah. How you doing today?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Good. Better than Mary? Are you awake?
Yeah, yeah, I think so sometime.
Okay. Okay. Um, so if you could turn up your mic just a little bit, that would help.
Okay.
Because okay. Um, one question I have for you is, have you ever seen the rental equipment lots? Uh,
Uh, the
like
riddle equipment lots?
rental equipment lots.
Oh,
Have you?
sorry. Rental equipment, yes, I have.
Yeah. So did you know? I don't know if you've seen them, but I've seen them. Like you're driving down the freeway in San Bernardino, Riverside, or something like that. And you look off to the side, and they'll say like A1 equipment rental. That most of those pieces of equipment, and some of them are big, right? I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen what I've seen, but I see dump trucks and
Hmm.
backhoes and stuff like that. Those are actually owned by other construction companies, and they put them there just so they can earn money when they're not using them. I don't know if you knew that or not, but
Yeah.
it's a fun fact. Um, so yeah, so there is this active equipment rental market. That's one thing I wanted to ask you about. The other thing I wanted to ask you about is, um, have you ever heard? Now, this is kind of like an old term now, um, but you might have heard it. So after the Great Recession in 2009, 2010, there was like a politically active group, and they were called the 99%. Did you ever hear that?
Yeah, it sounds actually familiar.
Yeah. Do you know what their deal was?
No, well, I don't remember, but I remember learning about something like that in history.
Okay. Well, but you don't remember like the 99% versus the 1% and all that stuff. Does that ring any bells or?
No, not really, but
Okay. Well, so one of the things that has been kind of like a politically hot topic, and anybody in chat, if you guys want to chat about this for a minute, we can chat about it. Because I think it's another one of these kind of like fun facts. Um, is the basic idea? I don't see anybody in chat, but is there anybody else that wants to chat about this, about the 99% or the 1%, or like what you guys know about that? Oh, okay. Christian, do you want to talk about this for a minute? No. You don't have a mic. Okay, well, if you get a mic and you want to talk about this, then we can talk about it for a minute. If anybody else wants to talk about it, then that's fine too. But I'll continue with Ezekiel and see if you get the idea. So one of the things that people, particularly since the Great Recession, have brought up um, is that there's a big difference between the income and the wealth of people in what they call the top 1% of the income bracket. Yeah, and it's income inequality. So Beverly, have you heard this? Or Luke, do you guys want to talk about this? I don't know if you guys have mics.
I've heard about it, but I'm not sure if I'm versed enough to really talk about it.
Well, we're just talking generally. So it's okay if you're not an expert. I'm not going to criticize you for that. I don't know that I'm an expert, even though I'm a PhD economist. This isn't my area of expertise, particularly wealth and income inequality. Though I will point out one thing first, and that is, Beverly, does it make sense to you? There's a difference between wealth and income, right?
Right.
Income is like what you make in a given year, and wealth is like the amount that you've accumulated over your lifetime,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it really depends upon whether you're talking about wealth or income inequality. And I just want to point out that I'm talking about income inequality right now. And so one of the things that people have noticed is that the amount of income going to the top 1% of income earners has gotten bigger as a share of total income generated in the United States over the last like 20, 30 years. So if you go back to like 1970, 1980, the top 1% still made more than other people lower down in the income distribution, but the amount more that they make has gotten bigger. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. And I don't know if you think that that's something to be concerned about or not. Some people do think it's something to be concerned about. As an economist, other than making the observation that that's true, I don't, have any opinion about it being an issue of concern or not. And personally, my only, feeling, and I don't know about you, but I just want to be in the top 1%. So I don't care that they're making more. I just want to be there, right? But different people might have different feelings about this. But this was a big deal about 10 years ago after the Great Recession. So maybe that's why you heard about Beverly. Is there anything that I'm missing that maybe you've heard about that I'm not mentioning?
I don't think so.
Okay. So, but what I did want to point out is, do you know how most people get in the top 1%?
I hmm.
Like, I don't know. Are you interested in being into the top 1%?
I don't think I'll ever get there, realistically.
Well, actually, you have a much better chance than you think. And again, anybody that has a mic, Spencer, if you want to talk about this, is funny. This is a fun thing to talk about. I don't know if you have a mic, or Mary.
I remember in a history class where we talked about this.
Okay.
Where like in history they don't typically talk about the top 1% because they're kind of like irrelevant, and they're so rich that like we'll never really get to there.
Oh,
Um,
okay. Did they give you any
yeah,
data in history about this stuff?
not really.
Yeah, okay, okay. Because I'm about to tell a different story, and my story is based on data that I'm not going to present right now. But now you got me thinking maybe I should. Um, and what about you, Spencer? Did you get your? Do you have comments or?
Yeah, in
Okay.
terms of looking at it, at least in our generation, in terms of like who, like when we think of the 1%, we think of like Bill Gates, Elon Musk, Mark
Right.
Zuckerberg, all these really big names who have like billions of dollars. I'll
Right.
keep Bezos on the off because I think I don't know enough about him to really speak on him, so I don't want to come up with any assumptions that I don't have any like base to.
Right. Right.
But I know for Gates, Elon, and I'm pretty sure Zuckerberg, they all had pretty substantial quote unquote donations to get their things kind of off the ground. And I know at least for Elon, he had that wealth to fall back on should he fail, which is
Okay.
I think a big deal. So that allows him to like, make more risks or take more risks.
Right. And so like the thing that I want to be clear about is to be in the top 1% of income. Do you know how much money you have to make a year?
Not off the top of my head, no.
It's only about $400,000. So the people that you're talking about aren't in the top 1%. They're in the top probably less than 1/10 of 1%. Because 1% is 1 out of 100 people, right? And 1/10 of 1% is like 1 out of 1,000. And I would say, there are 330 million people in the United States, and the people that you're talking about are probably like in the top 300 highest income generators for sure, right? So they're probably, like one in out of 300 million. 300 times a million is 300 million. Like they're like one in a million. Do you see what I'm saying, Spencer?
Yeah. So I actually have a question. Because based off of that, if I have a higher chance of being in this quote unquote 1%,
Yep.
would I also have a better chance of having that like ownership of these? I don't want to say means of production because that's always twisted, but kind of
Well,
like
no,
just
no. Well, I mean, it's not. Actually, like I said, almost all of us end up. Remember, if you own stocks, you're part owner in a company. Like I'm a part owner of Google. I own the means of production of Google, but a little tiny, tiny bit. And you know why I own it, Spencer? I think I mentioned this before, but I mean,
yeah, because oh geez, it's a little hazy right now, but it's because you have that stock.
it's not 420
Yeah.
when you hey, yeah, I have that stock, so yeah, I own the means of production, but just a little tiny bit. But you know why I own the stock?
Because it's either you get it through the company you work for or
Yes.
you can buy it kind of as
Well,
part of the
you could buy it on your own, but I
Mhm.
don't do much stock market investing my own. I'm a public employee of the state of California, and the largest private investor in the whole country is the California Public Employees Retirement System. So it's like to pay for my retirement. I mean, that's the reason why most people invest and why the pension plans invest in these companies. So saying owning the means of production, that's not a dirty word in our class. You're fine.
Okay, sweet.
Like I said, my only problem, if I have a problem with the top 1%, it's only that I want to be one of them and I'm not. And my only issue with owning means of production is maybe that I'd like to own more than I do. It's a way to
Right.
generate income. But the reason why I wanted to talk about the top 1% is, is because it's like it makes a good something to put on like a placard if you're going to protest. We are the 99%. We are the 1%. The 1%, whatever. But it sounds less persuasive if you say we are the 99.999%, right? And it's the 0.0001% that has, it's like you were talking about intergenerational wealth and all this other stuff, right?
It doesn't flow off the tongue.
No, it doesn't. It just sounds better, 99%, 1%. But like I said, it's not even within rounding error. I mean, we're talking about, the people that you mentioned are a tiny, tiny fraction of the total. And in the top 1%, and I want to talk about the lower 0.75%. So 75% of those people in the top 1%, not actually where the wealth gets really skewed is the top 0.25% and above. But below that, earning $400,000 or $500,000 a year is not uncommon. Most of those people in that, and the reason why I brought this whole thing up is most of the people in the top 1% that are in the lower 0.75%. You know what I'm talking about now? Am my percentages making sense? They're not in the top. They're in the bottom top. Is that okay, Spencer? Am I making sense?
Yeah, I get the math.
Yeah. So you only have to make about $400,000 a year to be there, and the threshold used to be lower. I'm just moving it up based on inflation from the last time that I saw it, but it was even like in the mid 300s when I saw it. But I'm saying 400,000 to be safe. So talk about people that make between like $400,000 and $800,000 a year, right? Well, most of those people are small business owners, and most of them are people about my age. Maybe they're a plumbing contractor or an electrical contractor, or maybe they're a lawyer that started their own law firm, or a dentist that started their own dental office, right? And you also know, like a lot of doctors and surgeons, they work as private businesses, even though they're working with hospitals. They don't work for the hospital, they contract with the hospital. So there are lots of professions, but normally the way that it works is they start out after they've gotten their degrees or credentials, or if they're a tradesperson after they finish their experience as a journeyman. Do you have anybody in your family that does electrical or plumbing or anything like that? Any construction work?
Actually, my grandpa used to work on power lines a lot, and he would contract his work out to do that.
Yeah. So like I have a nephew, and my nephew is like about 35 right now. And my sister's a little bit older, so her kids are a little bit older. And yeah, so he didn't go to college. He's got a little bit of college, but he's worked for this same electrical company and like gone up the ranks, and was out in the field and getting all of his training and stuff like that to get his electrician's license and complete all the training. So now he makes a pretty good living. He's not in the top 1%, but I imagine by the time that he's my age, he will probably own his own electrical contracting firm. And then it's a matter of networking and getting, like you were talking about your grandpa, like getting the contracts and stuff like that. So normally people in their mid 50s, early 60s that have been in these professions for a long time, then at that point in time, they have a very successful business. And then the typical, and a lot of times it's authors that end up in the 1%. But again, the way that it happens, I don't know, you know who J.K. Rowling is, right?
Yeah.
Harry Potter, right? Do you know her story?
Off the top of my head, she tried publishing, didn't get anything for
Yeah.
a while, and then somebody finally gave her a chance, and it just exploded.
Yeah. So her first Harry Potter book, right? she was like writing on the back of napkins, taking a bus back and forth to some like, you know, I don't know if she was a waitress or whatever, but yeah. And so now I don't know how old J.K. Rowling is, but yeah, they work and they work and they work and they work and they work, and then eventually they get a hit, and then boom, for a couple years, they're doing great. And obviously J.K. Rowling's an exception because she's done exceptionally well. But if you go down to, well, I would say go down to the bookstore, your Barnes and Noble. I don't know if you can get in or not, or if you go online and you look at all these thousands of authors that are doing these fantasy mystery novels and all this other stuff, and most of them you've never heard of, and you know they have a hit like the second Dragon's once removed grandmother that went big for like 3 years in some little niche thing. Then they make a couple $100,000 for a couple years, and then they normally retire and it's done. So, so the reason why I'm bringing it up is that the opportunity cost of the business owner's time is an implicit cost of doing business, because all they get is they get the profit that's left over. And if it's somebody like my nephew, who is a licensed electrician, and he starts his own electric business, right, or contracting business, and he doesn't do well, right, and he could earn more money if he went out and sold his services to another company, right, then the amount of money he could have earned that he's giving up to run the business, and he's not generating any profits for himself, right? That's an actual true cost of running the business that most people don't consider. It's the cost of the owner's time in the next best alternative, which is usually working for someone else. So you can have a lot of business owners who generate $20,000, $30,000 worth of profit a year and are working their hearts out. I don't know. Do you know anybody, Spencer, that's owned their own business, um, small business? I have a couple of them in my family.
Yeah, not directly. I know a few friends who are trying to get like their little things kind of up on their feet, but I know through association a few like restaurant owners.
Yeah,
But
and
money
is
to
it the restaurant owners? It's super hard work, right?
oh, it's ridiculous. I worked for one of the guys, and it's just you're basically scraping by every month.
Yeah, and you're there like at 4 a.m. And then when they finally close down, you're like the person cleaning up. If somebody calls in sick, it's all on you. You got to make it run. So I guess the point is that a lot of business owners, they struggle along. They're making maybe this little bit of profit, which is going into their pockets, but they're not earning a salary doing something else. So, I'll just give you one example, because you brought up restaurant owners, and this is another group that often ends up in the top 1%, because they, again, after years and years and years, build up a clientele and a reputation, and then they're doing good for a couple years, and then eventually the business closes down, or maybe their menu doesn't keep up and people stop going for whatever reason. But my wife, her family has a friend that he was in the restaurant business for 40 years. And he recently had to close his restaurant because he finally, I mean, obviously 40 years, the guy's ready to retire anyway, but it just wasn't worth it to him anymore because he wasn't making enough money. So I think he last time my wife talked to him, he was looking for another job to go work for somebody else. But yeah, so restaurant owners, small business owners, that, and I don't want to use the word luck because it's a lot of hard work, but the market is like the market is. If you're somebody that opens a restaurant in the right location, and it's got the right amenities, it looks good, and you build a good reputation, you can do very well. But there are a lot of them, like you're saying, that scrape by. So there's an element of, you know, chance involved too. And that's mostly the people that, worked hard and got lucky and started a business. So I guess the other thing I was going to say to everybody here, not only are you guys more likely to be in the top 1% because you're getting your degree, but if you really want to improve your chances, try to figure out at some point how you can start a successful small business. Hopefully it'll grow and be a big business. But that's most of the people that end up in the top 1%, but they're not the Elon Musks. Okay. And this is all by way of saying that whenever we're talking about costs, we mean explicit and implicit costs, and owners get the profit from the business. And if their profits aren't greater than what they could earn if they were employed, then there's actually the business is making what we call an economic loss. Because if you include all of their costs, including what they could earn working for somebody else, then the business is actually losing money. So is that kind of clear, Spencer, or clear as mud?
It's better. Yeah.
Better. Okay. So that was just way of kind of like warning you when you see costs, don't just run and think it's like a bill for electricity or rent. There are also these implicit costs that don't generate receipts. So once now we've defined costs, we want to make sure, and if anybody has any questions, just go ahead and put something in the chat or speak up, and we can talk about it. But I'm going to try to wrap this up for today because we're just starting to talk about costs. Costs actually, then once we're talking about costs, we've got total costs, and total costs are composed of variable costs and fixed costs. Fixed costs are costs that do not vary with the amount of output that you generate. So that's normally things like rent and like insurance. Almost all businesses pay insurance. And regardless of they have a ton of customers or a few customers, they're just paying insurance like on their equipment and stuff like that. Variable costs are costs like you think like electricity, materials, things like that, that your costs actually go up or they change as you produce more and more. So this is again from your textbook. I think it does a nice job of illustrating the components of total costs. And so you guys can read the rest of that. The other thing I want to draw your attention to is this second graph. And so this graph, I would say minus the MR line, where the MC and the ATC intersect. This is what I illustrated in that homework 15 on Ignithium. And this general graph, you guys should read this section, understand what marginal costs are and what average total costs are. And if you understand average total costs and marginal costs, then you're in the right direction. We've got more to say about it. So this isn't like your last chance, but please read the cost of production stuff. If you guys are a little bit behind on your reading, it's time to, focus a little bit, because if you get the stuff that we're talking about in these three sections on costs, then you will be well prepared to go on and finish up the rest of the material in the course and do well. If you don't understand the cost stuff, then everything else that comes afterwards is not going to make a lot of sense, because we build, when we're talking about businesses and business strategy, the first one is the cost related strategy component for maximizing profits. And the second one is the revenue strategies, and they're linked together. So we handle costs first, and then we talk about revenue possibilities, and those revenue possibilities relate back to the costs. So if you don't understand costs, you want to understand the revenues and how these businesses that we're going to talk about are maximizing their profits. All of that's going to get really confusing. Okay, so focus on costs And if you guys have any more questions, I'm happy to answer them. But otherwise than that, I'm gonna stop our video for right now. And